The steak on Laura's plate had long gone cold. She pushed it gently with her fork, more out of habit than hunger, the metallic scrape against porcelain grating on her nerves. Across the table, Michael ate in silence, his posture straight, his motions methodical, every slice and chew a performance of control. They used to fill this space with chatter, arguments over politics, stories from work, the kind of laughter that carried through the house. Now the air was still, heavy enough that Laura could hear the faint tick of the clock in the hallway, a sound more oppressive than comforting. Her eyes flicked toward him, searching for something, an expression, a spark, a reminder of the man she had once believed in. But Michael's gaze never rose from his plate. His jaw worked steadily, his face an impenetrable mask. "You're late," she finally murmured, her voice breaking the suffocating quiet. Michael didn't look up. "Work," he said, flat-clipped. A single word, final. The answer lodged in her chest. Work. It was always work now. Yet she had noticed the new suit jacket she hadn't bought, the faint trace of perfume that wasn't hers, the way his phone never left his side anymore. She tried to swallow her unease with a sip of water, but it stayed stuck in her throat. The memories rose unbidden. Michael surprising her with flowers, teasing her about her clumsy dancing in the kitchen, whispering promises of forever under the covers. That man felt like a ghost, haunting the shell across from her. Laura forced herself to ask, was it busy? This time he raised his eyes. The look was brief but sharp, as if gauging her intent before softening into something that almost resembled affection. Always is. Her lips curved into a hollow smile, but inside her chest a quiet panic stirred. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe herself. But the silence between them had become its own language, one she didn't yet understand but feared she soon would. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Somewhere deep inside, Laura knew this quiet wasn't ordinary. It was the calm before something she couldn't name, something already moving toward their door. Laura drifted into a shallow, restless sleep, the kind where every sound of the house became sharper, heavier. She thought she heard the faint creak of the stairs, the groan of a floorboard, but when she turned, Michael lay still beside her, his breathing even, his face perfectly calm. Then came the pounding. It reverberated through the front door, 3 hard knocks, firm enough to rattle the frame. Laura sat upright, heart racing. Michael stirred but didn't flinch, rolling out of bed with eerie composure. "Stay here," he murmured, though his tone carried more command than comfort. Laura pulled her robe tight and crept behind him anyway, padding softly down the hallway. The house seemed darker than usual, shadows stretching long across the floor as the knocks came again. Louder, more insistent. When Michael opened the door, 2 police officers stood on the porch, their uniforms dampened by the misty night air. Red and blue lights flickered faintly from the patrol car parked at the curb, washing the scene in an uneasy glow. "Good evening," the taller officer said, his voice steady but firm. "Sorry to disturb you at this hour. There's been an incident in the neighborhood. We're speaking to everyone on the street." Laura's pulse quickened. "An incident?" she asked, her voice thin. The officer's gaze lingered on her before shifting back to Michael. "A violent crime. We're gathering any observations. Strange noises, people passing through, anything out of the ordinary." Michael didn't miss a beat. His voice was smooth, untroubled. "Nothing unusual here." "Quiet night," Laura froze. She remembered the faint sound she'd heard earlier that evening, like something heavy dragging across pavement outside, but her words caught in her throat. Michael's certainty pressed against her, silencing her. The shorter officer scribbled notes, then handed over a card. "If you recall anything later, don't hesitate to call." Michael took it, thanked them politely, and closed the door with calculated precision. The lock clicked, final, sealing the silence back inside. Laura turned to him, whispering fiercely, "Why didn't you let me speak?" There was nothing to say," he interrupted, his eyes narrowing. His tone was calm, but beneath it, an edge cut sharp. She stood there, trembling, the echo of the officer's words replaying in her mind. A violent crime. Michael walked past her without another glance, disappearing into the shadows of the house. Laura remained by the door, staring at the card in his hand, her chest tight with dread. For the first time, she felt the silence of their marriage transform into something darker. an accomplice to secrets she wasn't ready to face. Sleep never returned after the officers left. Laura lay awake beside Michael, his breathing steady, her own caught in shallow bursts. The card they'd given him sat on the nightstand, untouched, a silent reminder of what had been said and what hadn't. By morning, she noticed the first detail. Michael's shoes, left near the back door, were caked with dried mud. She frowned. The garden had been neatly tended the day before, and the streets outside were dry. Where had he been walking so late at night? He brushed past her, already dressed for work, and offered a clipped explanation. A long night at the office. Yet as he shrugged into his jacket, Laura's eyes lingered on the shirt he had discarded in the laundry basket. The faint rust-colored stains near the cuff pulled her closer. She lifted the fabric, her fingers trembling. The scent was faint but sharp. Iron, not ink, not wine. Don't overthink, she whispered to herself, folding it quickly as if hiding it from her own gaze. But as the day wore on, the questions grew heavier. Where did the extra hours really go? Who was he meeting when his phone buzzed and he stepped outside to answer in hushed tones? Laura's mind dragged her backward to years when their lives were easier. She remembered Michael's warmth on summer evenings, the way he used to kiss her hand absent-mindedly while watching television, the sparkle in his eyes when they dreamed of children. The man she had loved had seemed incapable of secrets. Now the contrast was suffocating. She tried to convince herself she was paranoid, frayed by stress, maybe even tainted by the detective's visit. Michael often reminded her she was sensitive, that her mind leapt to shadows where there were none. Perhaps this was just another one of those moments. Yet when he returned that night, his explanation didn't fit the timeline she remembered. His story shifted slightly, a detail added, another removed. His smile was polite, but his eyes never met hers. Laura nodded, pretending to believe him. But in her chest, doubt spread like cracks in glass, fragile. Invisible at first, but destined to shatter. Laura waited until after dinner. Her hands clenched around the damp dish towel, rehearsing the words she could no longer keep inside. Michael sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, the faint glow illuminating his expressionless face. "You told me you got home around 9 the other night," she began carefully, her voice unsteady. "But I heard the door well past 11. Michael looked up slowly, surprise flickering across his features before melting into a gentle smile. He set the phone down and reached for her hand. "Laura, you must be exhausted. You know how it gets when you don't sleep." Time blurs together. Her stomach tightened. "I know what I heard." His thumb stroked her knuckles with deliberate tenderness. "You're worrying yourself sick over nothing. I'd never lie to you." His voice carried warmth, soothing, almost convincing. But when she didn't yield, his tone shifted, sharp, cutting. "Do you realize how unfair this is? You twist every detail, make monsters out of shadows. It's exhausting, Laura, for both of us." The towel slipped from her grasp. "I'm just asking for honesty." His eyes hardened, the warmth drained away. "Honesty? Or proof that fits the story you've already written in your head?" Her throat closed. Doubt slithered in, wrapping tight. Had she exaggerated the sound of the door? Had fatigue muddled the hours? He had always said she was sensitive, prone to suspicion. Maybe he was right. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though guilt weighed heavier than the words. Michael leaned back, his smile returning like a mask perfectly reapplied. "That's better. We'll be fine as long as you trust me." Laura nodded, but the unease only deepened. Because beneath his reassurances lingered a chill she couldn't shake. The sense that she wasn't losing her grip on reality, but on the man she thought she knew. The doorbell rang mid-morning, sharp and deliberate, pulling Laura from the half-hearted cleaning she had taken refuge in. She wiped her hands on her apron and opened the door, expecting a neighbor. Instead, a woman in plain clothes stood there, badge glinting softly against her blouse. "Mrs. Hale?" "Detective Rivera." Her voice was even, professional but not unkind. "May I come in?" Laura hesitated, her pulse spiking. She thought of Michael's words the night before. "Trust me," and the way his smile had folded neatly over the truth she couldn't reach. She stepped aside. They sat at the kitchen table, the same place where Laura and Michael's silence had stretched like barbed wire. Rivera rested a small notepad in front of her. "I'll be direct," the detective said. We're following up on the incident the other night. Your husband told my colleagues he was home early, but I need to confirm. What time did he come in? Laura froze. 11, she was certain. But Michael's voice echoed inside her. Time blurs together, Laura. Her hands tightened on her coffee mug. I think it was late. After 11, Rivera's pen hovered. Thank you. That matches other information we're reviewing. She leaned back slightly, her eyes narrowing. Has your husband ever mentioned his past work in New Brighton? Laura blinked. New Brighton? No, he's never lived there. The detective's gaze didn't waver. That's interesting. His name came up in connection with an unresolved case there, about 6 years ago. Nothing conclusive, but his presence was noted. The words struck like a slap. Laura's breath faltered. 6 years ago, she and Michael had just celebrated their first anniversary. He had told her he was traveling for a work seminar that summer. She remembered the postcards, the cheerful phone calls. You must be mistaken, she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. Rivera closed her notebook gently. I hope I am. But I need you to be honest with me, Mrs. Hale. If you notice anything unusual, anything at all, contact me directly. She slid a card across the table. When the detective left, Laura remained seated, the card burning against her palm. Michael had hidden something, an entire piece of his life she had never glimpsed. The betrayal settled deep, heavier than fear. And yet, even as her chest tightened, part of her clung to denial. Maybe Rivera was wrong. Maybe Michael wasn't the man she thought he might be. But when she glanced out the window at the garden, its soil uneven and freshly turned, her heart whispered otherwise. The detective's card stayed on the kitchen counter like a blade, sharp and accusing. Laura couldn't bring herself to hide it, yet she didn't dare leave it where Michael might notice. Every glance at it reopened Rivera's words. His name came up before. By late afternoon, Michael still hadn't returned home. The silence of the house felt oppressive, every creak of the floorboards an intrusion. Laura wandered restlessly, her eyes drawn again and again to the window overlooking the backyard. The soil looked uneven, darker in patches. She remembered Rivera's questions, the mud on Michael's shoes, and a chill ran through her. Almost without deciding, she slipped on her garden gloves and stepped outside. The air was cool, damp with the promise of rain. Birds called faintly from the trees, but even their song sounded wary. She crouched where the earth looked freshly disturbed, pressing her hand into the soil. It yielded too easily, soft and loose. Her pulse quickened. With shaking hands, she began to dig. Clumps of dirt broke apart under her fingers, the scent rising sharp and metallic. She told herself she was imagining it, her nerves conjuring ghosts. But then her glove brushed against something coarse. Laura froze. Carefully, she pulled, and the earth gave way to reveal a strip of fabric, darkened, stiff. She held it up, and the smell struck her fully now. Iron, unmistakable, like blood soaked deep into cloth. Her breath came shallow. She dropped the fabric as though it burned her, stumbling backward. Her eyes darted to the house, to the door standing ajar. She hadn't left it that way. Laura, Michael's voice. Calm, too calm. He stepped onto the porch, his silhouette framed in the dim light behind him. His face was unreadable, his hands empty. But his presence was heavier than the discovery in the ground. What are you doing out here? He asked softly, though the softness felt rehearsed. Laura's voice cracked. What is this? What's buried here, Michael? He descended the steps slowly, each one measured. His eyes flicked to the disturbed soil, then back to her. For the briefest moment, something cold flashed across his face before he replaced it with a gentle smile. You've been under so much stress, he murmured, brushing dirt from her sleeve as though comforting her. You're letting your imagination run wild. There's nothing here but earth. But I saw his hand closed over hers, firm, unyielding. Promise me you'll stop digging where you don't belong. The words were tender, almost affectionate, but the warning beneath them chilled her to the bone. Laura stared into his calm, steady eyes and felt the truth sink in. The danger wasn't in the soil. It was standing right in front of her. For 2 days after the garden, Michael was gentler than ever. He brewed her morning coffee, cooked dinner, even brushed a kiss across her forehead as if sealing their marriage back into something ordinary. But the gestures felt hollow, rehearsed. like a script he had memorized. Laura began to notice the cracks, the way his smile lingered a fraction too long, the way his hands tightened on her shoulders just a little too firmly when he leaned close. His affection was not warmth, it was strategy, a way to keep her still, to keep her silent. At night, she lay awake, listening to the even rhythm of his breathing. In the dim light of the bedroom, his face seemed carved from stone, unyielding. She turned her gaze to the ceiling, memories rushing in unbidden. She remembered their first year together, road trips with the windows down, late-night laughter, whispered promises of children. She remembered the feeling of safety, of certainty, of love without suspicion. But those memories clashed violently with the man who had stood above her in the garden, smiling as he told her not to dig. The man who dismissed blood-soaked cloth as imagination. Her inner world spiraled. She wanted desperately to cling to the past, to believe that kindness was real, yet every moment now carried an undercurrent of fear. She could not reconcile the husband she once adored with the stranger who held her hand too tightly. One evening, as she folded laundry, Michael entered the room without a sound. She startled, dropping a shirt. His smile was quick, precise. "Nervous?" "I didn't hear you," she said, her voice thin. He stepped closer, placing the shirt back in her hands with practiced tenderness. "You've been jumpy. I don't like seeing you this way." His tone was warm, but his eyes were flat, unreadable. Laura forced a nod, though her chest tightened with dread. She no longer believed his reassurances. She no longer believed she was safe. The mask was slipping, and Laura knew the next time it fell, there would be no pretending left. The night pressed heavy against the windows, the house cloaked in a silence that throbbed louder than sound. Laura lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her heart racing as if it knew what her mind was about to do. She turned to Michael, his body still beside her, his breathing steady. "Michael," she whispered. His eyes opened immediately, catching hers in the dark. No groggy blink, no startled turn, just that unsettling readiness. "What is it?" His voice was calm, too calm, as though he had been waiting. She swallowed hard. "I need the truth." "About the garden. About the nights you come home late. About everything." For a long moment he didn't move. Then, with a sigh that sounded almost indulgent, he sat up, resting his elbows on his knees. "You don't want the truth, Laura. You want a story that makes you feel safe. But safe and true aren't the same." Her throat tightened. "Stop dodging me. Tell me what you've done." Michael turned toward her, his face barely visible in the moonlight. "Pieces," he said softly. "I can give you pieces. But once you know, you're in it with me. There's no stepping back." Laura's stomach twisted. "In it with you? I haven't done anything." He chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. "That's what you think. But you've seen the soil. You've touched what's buried there. If anyone comes asking, you can't say you didn't know. Silence makes you complicit, Laura, whether you like it or not." Her pulse hammered. "That's not fair." "Fair?" His voice sharpened, the tenderness slipping. "Fair is a fantasy. Reality is this: if I fall, you fall. They'll tear apart this house, drag your name through every headline, and no one will care that you were innocent. You'll go down as my partner." Tears stung her eyes. "So what, you're telling me you've done something terrible and now I'm trapped?" He leaned closer, his hand gripping hers firmly, almost tenderly. "I'm telling you that everything I've done for us. For our life, for keeping the world we built intact. That's love, Laura. Messy, ugly, real." Her body trembled under his words, the contradiction suffocating her. Affection laced with threat, intimacy braided with terror. She wanted to scream, to run, to believe none of it was true. Yet his certainty carved into her, convincing her that perhaps she was already bound to him, already part of his crimes simply by staying. When he finally lay back down, closing his eyes as though nothing had happened, Laura remained frozen, staring into the dark. His words echoed like shackles. "If I fall, you fall." And beneath the weight of that promise, she felt the walls of her life closing in, knowing there was no safety left in silence. Morning brought no relief. Michael left early, leaving behind the faint smell of cologne and the echo of his midnight words. "If I fall, you fall." Laura sat at the kitchen table, her coffee untouched, the silence of the house pressing in like a verdict. The knock on the door jolted her. She braced herself, half expecting Michael's return. But when she opened it, Detective Rivera stood on the porch, her expression taut, a folder tucked under her arm. "May I come in?" Rivera asked. Laura hesitated, then stepped aside. The detective spread the folder across the table, sliding a series of photographs toward her. Grainy images, but unmistakable. Michael, standing close to a woman Laura had never seen before. Dark hair, tense eyes. Her hand gripping his arm like someone desperate for safety. Laura's breath caught. "Who is she?" "Claire Donovan," Rivera said quietly. "She was close to your husband. More than close. She's also tied to the investigation. Claire's been missing for 2 weeks." The words crashed through Laura, each one sharper than the last. Michael's late nights, the lies, the scent of unfamiliar perfume, it all collided with the photographs in front of her. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "There must be some mistake." "Michael, he wouldn't." Rivera's gaze was steady. "I know this is painful, but his connection to Claire isn't speculation. Financial records, meetings, messages. We've traced enough to know she wasn't just a stranger." Laura's vision blurred with tears. Betrayal seared deeper than fear. A wound she hadn't expected even after everything she'd uncovered. It wasn't only crime that tied him to the shadows. It was another woman, another life. Rivera's voice softened. "You need to decide, Mrs. Hale. Staying silent will only bury you deeper with him." When the detective left, Laura remained at the table staring at Michael's face in the photographs. The man she had once trusted now stood revealed as a stranger. Husband, liar, lover of another, and possibly worse. And she knew the moment was coming when she would have to choose. The photographs of Michael with Claire Donovan lay burned into Laura's mind long after Detective Rivera left. She carried them in her head like ghosts, overlaying every memory she had of her husband. His gentle touches, his lies, his late-night absences. Each image unraveled her. Each unanswered question tightened the noose. When Michael returned that evening, the house felt smaller, the walls closing in. He moved with his usual calm, placing his keys on the counter, slipping off his shoes. To anyone else, he might have seemed the picture of a devoted husband. To Laura, the performance was unbearable. He leaned down, brushing a kiss across her temple. "You've been quiet," he murmured. Her body stiffened beneath his touch. "Just tired." His eyes lingered, searching, and for a moment she thought he saw straight through her. Then he smiled, masking whatever flicker had crossed his face. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be better." But Laura knew tomorrow would not be better. Tomorrow, or the day after, Michael's mask would shatter entirely, and she would be standing too close when it did. Later, in the bathroom, she locked the door and pressed her palms to the counter to steady herself. Detective Rivera's card sat tucked in her robe pocket, its edges worn soft from her constant handling. She stared at it in the mirror, her reflection pale and hollow-eyed. If she called, she would betray her husband, the man she had loved, the man she had built her life with. But if she stayed silent, she would drown beside him, her name forever bound to his crimes. Her hands trembled as she dialed. Each ring was a drumbeat in her chest. When Rivera's steady voice answered, Laura's knees nearly buckled. "I'll help you," she whispered. "I can't live like this anymore." The line was quiet for a moment, then Rivera replied firmly, "You're doing the right thing. But you must be careful. He can't know." Laura ended the call, her breath ragged, her body trembling as though she'd leapt from a cliff. When she emerged, Michael was already in bed, his breathing deep, steady. She slid beneath the covers, lying stiff beside him. His arm draped over her waist, warm, protective. She stared at the ceiling, her eyes burning with tears. She had chosen survival, but she knew the cost would come, devastating, inevitable. The first flash of red and blue fractured the bedroom window just before dawn. Laura's eyes snapped open, heart pounding. Outside, tires screeched against pavement, followed by the thunder of boots. Then the crash, the front door splintering under a battering ram. Michael was up instantly, not confused, not afraid, ready. His face twisted in a way Laura had never seen before, rage burning through the calm mask he had worn for years. "What did you do?" he hissed, his voice raw, venomous. Shouts filled the hallway. "Police, stay where you are!" Officers flooded the house, flashlights cutting through the dark. Their beams danced across photographs on the walls. family moments now revealed as props in a theater of lies. Laura stumbled back, shielding her eyes as the chaos swarmed around them. Officers pinned Michael against the floor, forcing his arms behind his back. He fought, not with panic but with fury, his voice rising over the commotion. "You think this saves you, Laura? You think you're clean?" His eyes locked on hers, wild, piercing. "You're part of this. They'll know you were part of this." Her chest constricted, shame and terror colliding. She wanted to scream that he was wrong, that she had only stayed silent out of fear. But even she felt the truth in his words. Silence had bound her to him, even if only by perception. An officer's voice rang out from the basement. "We've got evidence here." Another from the yard, blood-soaked fabric buried deep. The house she had once called safe was unraveling, room by room. Michael was dragged upright, wrists locked in steel. He stood tall despite the cuffs, his eyes never leaving hers. And then came his final words, spoken with a jagged smile. "You'll never be free of me. Not now, not ever." The officers pulled him toward the door, his voice still echoing in her ears as the flashing lights bathed the house in chaos. Laura sank against the wall, trembling, the weight of his promise heavy in her chest. Outside, dawn broke cold and merciless, exposing the ruins of a life built on lies. The courthouse smelled of dust and varnish, the air thick with whispers that clung to Laura's skin like smoke. She sat in the back row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as though prayer might anchor her. At the front, Michael stood in chains, the mask gone, his face hollow yet burning with something unbroken. The prosecution moved with brutal precision. Photographs of the blood-stained cloth, the financial records linking him to Claire Donovan, the testimonies that painted him as both deceiver and predator. Piece by piece, the life Laura thought she knew was stripped bare, revealed as something monstrous. Yet even as each damning detail stacked against him, she saw the man she had once loved, the one who twirled her in their kitchen, who whispered dreams of children. That ghost haunted every word, every image, making her grief heavier than any verdict could deliver. When Michael was given the chance to speak, his voice was steady, deliberate. He didn't plead for mercy. Instead, he turned in her direction, his eyes finding hers across the crowded room. "This doesn't end here, Laura," he said, a faint smile curling his lips. "We are bound till the very end." The gavel struck, sentencing him to life. The sound echoed like a final heartbeat, but Laura felt no relief, only the hollow ache of inevitability. Justice had been served, yet the cost was carved deep into her bones. Outside, cameras flashed, reporters shouted, strangers whispered her name in the same breath as his. The Hales, the couple at the center of the most horrifying case police had ever seen. Laura walked past them all, her steps steady but heavy. Freedom tasted like ash. The trial might have ended, but Michael's shadow followed her, stitched into her skin. She would always be his wife, her identity tethered to his crimes. That night, she returned to the house one last time. The rooms were gutted, police tape still fluttering across the yard. She stepped into the garden, now a scar of overturned earth, the soil raw and exposed. The wind cut sharp, carrying the scent of damp earth and memory. Marriage was meant to be forever, and in a way it was. Not through love, not through loyalty, but through the scars of betrayal and the chains of truth. Laura closed her eyes, a tear slipping free. She was free, yes, but never released, bound by shadows, by the man who had turned their love into a crime scene.